Okay, as a brief introduction, yes, can we go to slide 2, please? So I just wanted to run the audience through the key players in solar in PNG, and we have basically two. This is not a comprehensive list by any means either, so please just take it with a grain of salt. And also, none of the advice I'm giving is investment advice, so please just take it as my personal opinion. So solar and PNG, the key players. We have the government bodies and programs that listed there on the left. And this is really PNG Power Limited, who are running the rooftop solar project at the moment, which they developed in partnership with IFC. That's a program to encourage businesses in Port Moresby to do a test pilot of rooftop solar of at least several hundred kilowatts. We have the new National Energy Authority, which was just legislated earlier this year, and that's been created to take over some of the roles that PNG Power has held until now. For years now, PNG Power has been not only the utility, but it's been the regulator as well. So it's been assessing and granting licenses and doing the regulatory functions that really it shouldn't really have the obligation to do that, because it puts it in a position where it has to regulate itself. So we've now created the National Energy Authority, and that's going to take responsibilities away from PNG Power and from the ICCC and combine them into this new NEA body. And that's going to have the ability to grant power purchase agreements and generation licenses and develop new projects. The NEA hasn't really fully got its feet yet, and there was supposed to be a sort of a year and a half transition where the responsible people and bodies from PNG Power went over. That's still in development. We have under that the Climate Change and Development Authority, probably one of the most underrated government bodies in PNG. They really do an excellent job. They're the PNG's international face in the climate change negotiations. They've done a great job in negotiations for instance, with head of the Coalition of Rainforest Nations. We chair that, and we play an outsized role in many climate change negotiations, as people would know. But CCDA is also responsible for developing clean energy roadmap, so putting forward solar projects and hydro and mitigation of carbon emissions. We're the PNG Power Sector Investment Program. That's basically trying to connect to houses, power connections onto the grid. That's had good support from ADB and other partners like World Bank and other bilateral partners. We have the National Electricity Rollout Plan, which is developed by the Department of Energy, and that's, as it says, we're trying to get more electricity. PNG at the moment only has about 13% of our people connected to electricity, and we're trying to raise that to 70% by 2030, which is very ambitious, but the NEROP is a key part of that. And then we have the PNG Power 15-year development plan, which is, as it says, looking forward to the next 15 years, and this is regularly reviewed and updated. And all of these plans, they try to coordinate a bit, but it's not always perfect overlapping. So constantly in motion, a lot of moving parts, and we're trying to adjust that. In terms of NGOs and donor partners, we have the Solar Energy Association, of which I'm the president. That's a volunteer organisation brought together by members of the industry, academia, and we have some input and some great support from USAID, who've been great help since they came on board, and the other bilateral partners as well. We have the Business Council of PNG Energy Working Group, which Davari put together. I think Rup Bray is the chair of that. They've done some good stuff as energy use, as it particularly relates to the commercial sector. We have Power and Community, which is a DFAT program, and I really admire this program. It's looking to bridge the gap between village requirements of electricity and what the commercial sector is prepared to get into and engage with in terms of business contracts and agreements, which there is still a little bit of space between these two bodies, and Power and Community is really trying to bridge that and make it viable for both of them to get the developments they need. We have ESIP, which is the Energy and Social Infrastructure Program, which is by DFAT, and they do bigger sort of stuff adjacent to PNG Power, looking to upgrade mini grids and the PPL infrastructure. We have IFC, which is part of the World Bank. They do a lot of work here. and then the PNG Electrification Program, short for PP, which is in conjunction with our partners, the USA, Japan, New Zealand, and Australia. We have the Asian Development Bank. They do a lot of work here as well. And then we have FRIGA, which is a UNDP program to help encourage renewable energy. And I've left off China there as well, which was a huge oversight. I apologise for that. China does a lot of work here as well, and they're doing development of Ramu-2 and a lot of good low emissions carbon development. Next slide, please. So here I pulled up a little chart which should give you an idea of what our 2030 targets for electrification are. And you see there the blue bar is the population, which is 8 million there on the left in 2019, the last census, and actually quite strong growth to 2030, 2%, which takes us to almost 10 million people by 2030. The orange bar adjacent to it is the level of electrification we have, and the projections after 2020, 2021 are where we need to be. So the first three on the left is kind of our current position, and then if we're going to meet these 2030 targets of 30%, we really need to grow extremely strongly. And that has to come in off-grid areas quite a lot as well, which is where a huge proportion, maybe 80% of the population lives. They're not really close to power lines. They're not having access to things. And it's going to rely on solar and batteries to get electricity to them, I think. Why would solar be the most important thing for this? Well, we have a very high electricity tariff. It's 29 US cents per kilowatt hour. It's one of the highest in the world. Solar can come in well under that and deliver power for much cheaper, depending on the size and scale of the program. We have a weak grid with doesn't extend very far outside of urban centres. And it's anyone who lives in Port Moresby or Lae or the other large cities will know that we do occasionally have blackouts, and diesel generators are basically a requirement if you want to run a business here and bridge those blackouts. We have a growing resource sector with high power demands. We've got mines, we've got quarries, we've got fisheries programs coming on. They're going to use high amounts of power, and at the moment that's been used a lot by. It's been serviced a lot by fossil fuel, but with increasing prices of fossil fuels and really plummeting prices of renewable energy, it just makes sense that most of these resource projects going forward are going to be rely on renewable energy. We have Dirio and New Power, which are both gas-powered projects, power stations that feed into the grid in Port Moresby. Now, this is interesting because they're both multi-megawatt, 30 or 40 megawatts each, but there's quite difference in design. Dirio is a combined cycle gas turbine. It's high efficiency. You get a lot of bang for your buck. Develops a lot of power, but it doesn't have much flexibility. So it's good for supplying a lot of power over a steady course, whereas New Power is a reciprocating gas engine, and it's flexible. It can ramp up and down quite a lot. And looking forward, you'd have to say that New Power would be more suited to feeding variable renewable energy into the grid and to matching with that. So it'll be interesting to see how these two projects develop alongside each other. But in terms of variable renewable energy, New Power probably has a better design. We have the PEP, the PNG Electrification Project. I mentioned that on the last slide. We have to transition 5.9 million people. That's that orange bar on the right. From firewood, basically, or kerosene lanterns occasionally, to electricity by 2030. It's a huge ask, and we really need all hands on deck. And I think solar is going to be a key part of this. And just that last point, we need to grow our electricity access by 40% every year until 2030, and that it's a lot by any stage of numbers. But also, you consider that PNG's GDP growth, according to World Bank figures, is 3.5%. So we basically need to grow electricity access 10 times more than GDP is growing. So let's aim for the sky, I guess. Next slide, please. So an idea of if you want to invest in solar in PNG, who's going to be your market? You have rural development, which comes under the PEP, and the power and community projects that I mentioned previously. You have the commercial sector. So you have big companies getting into rooftop solar now, and they're taking advantage of this PPL rooftop pilot. But companies like Heineken, like Total, Heineken with the SB Brewery, Total with their outlets around Port Moresby, other big supermarkets, Tango Supermarket and other places are now investing in rooftop solar. You have urban residential, which a lot of sort of higher income housing now, they will have their own generator, or the compound might share one. But really, batteries with some solar PV, or even without solar PV, is going to quickly replace this. It eliminates the need for fuel, the dirt and smoke of the generator, and the high maintenance costs. So I think batteries will be very imminently everywhere. On utility scale, you have the National Energy Authority, which is pushing forward. It's supposed to do some a renewable energy auction later in this year. Was proposed by the previous managing director, and it's not clear yet what their strategy is. But I'm hearing that it's unchanged, and they will continue with this single buyer model that they proposed, and to do auctions. So I'm hoping that solar will be part of that. And you have provincial governments now getting into the game as well. And I think recently in New Ireland province, the governor there has developed a couple of solar farms to feed into some regional centres there. And there's still a bit of negotiation between PPL, the NEA, and the provincial government as to how those are managed. But I think the signs are all going that it's going to be solar in the future. You have the mines and resource sector. I'll have a bit to say about that on the next slide. But there's definitely every mine now is looking at renewable energy. They want solar, they want wind. Some of them are talking about hydrogen, electric vehicles, which segues me into the next point, which is electric vehicles V2H. Now, we've heard a bit recently about vehicle to grid, where your electric car with its large battery can connect to the grid and be sort of a battery for that. But we've also got vehicle to house, where you could drive your car up to your house, plug it into your network there, and then if the power goes out overnight, you've got a 40 or 50 kilowatt hour battery in your car that'll run your house all night, run the aircon, everything, and then still drive you to work in the morning. And if you have solar panels on your roof, even better. So most car manufacturers now are including V2H as an option, if not now, in the next model iteration, and I think this will be big. And the last point, this is going to be a huge market, battery recycling. I mean, there's a little bit of concern about something called e-waste, which is used lithium-ion batteries, how to dispose of them. I've done a lot of research into this lately, and basically what I've discovered is that a used and dead and useless battery is worth more just in its useless form than it costs to dispose of it. So you can actually make money by shipping these to battery recyclers, or have your own battery recycling here, ship it to Australia or to China. They will pay you more than it costs to do that transport that battery. So I think that's a really interesting thing, especially considering we're going to lean into batteries with off-grid and with EVs. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is an interesting World Bank map of projects that came up in 2018. There's been a few changes since then, but I will try and describe it. So you have the green dots are mines or proposed mines. The red dots are existing mines, and you can see that the purple line is transmission lines that they're trying to put together to connect all these. Sort of down near Leh there, you have the Wafi Golpu mine. Now, there's a million stories in this map, but I'll try and keep it a bit summarized. The Wafi Golpu was meant to be getting its electricity, or the plan was that they were going to buy electricity from Ramu 2, but the story on the going around is that the Ramu 2 tariff came in too high, and that Wafi Golpu said, thanks, but no thanks. We're going to try and source our own electricity. Now, that had a lot of flow-on effects for things like the Markham Valley Solar Farm that was being developed by Oil Search in conjunction with DFAT and the EU and a few other partners. That was recently, the PPA for that was cancelled for various reasons, but we think it's also because they want to free up this capacity that Wafi Golpu was supposed to take from Ramu 2. Wafi Golpu's not buying that energy, so Ramu 2 wants maybe to clear the decks a bit and have a bit more energy. You have, and I'm sure Sean will say about this later, between Port Moresby and Milne Bay is a world-class wind resource, and you have some big mines coming into Port Moresby as well, and you have the Maya Resources cement and limestone plant there. Now, this is a really interesting one. These guys, they want to import foreign coal from overseas and burn it there. And if they do that, they're going to get slugged twice with the carbon border tariffs that are proposed. So they get slugged for bringing the coal in, the foreign coal, and then exporting cement, which is also very high carbon. So it was maybe an interesting business model in 2006, but I'd give it a miss for now. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next slide is the sea centres. Now, this is just a short list of proposed projects for energy, solar and batteries that are coming in. This has largely been supported by ESIP in DFAT, and MAPRIC and Finschhafen are underway. There's $81 million worth or Kina's worth of projects there, and I think that some of them have funding, some of them don't. We need to dive into that a bit. A lot of solar and batteries. The WEWAC one, I think, is the largest, but all of these will get bigger as well. As power gets reliable and it gets cheaper, the sense of to scale it up will make a big difference. So I think they're going to grow. Next slide. And so this is my final slide, I think, and I just wanted to take a little bit of issue with the title of this presentation, Towards 2050, because 2050 to me is irrelevant. The decisions we're making now and to 2030 are what count. We need to have a plan, to decarbonize by 2025 and really be finalized with that by 2030. So talking about 2050, it's a good buzzword and it's great from a global perspective. But for people on this call and to listening to making investment choices now, we really need to think about 2025 up to 2030. That's the big one. PNG Power and NEA relationship will continue to evolve. I mentioned that on my previous slide. Once they get their act together and decide who's responsible for what, that will really open the market a bit. Fortescue, I'll just briefly touch on them. Andrew Forrest has plans to develop 200 gigawatts of renewable energy to make the green hydrogen that he needs. I think he's come to Port Moresby lately. He's been looking at the Purari River, and that's what he's got his eye on, but there's great solar and wind resource as well. And that will need a coral sea power cable to link us to North Queensland, where he can then make his ammonia, or potentially build an ammonia plant here. Ammonia and hydrogen are what he's into. I don't think the hydrogen market is mature enough yet, but ammonia is probably ready to go. The plummeting component prices of solar are just going to change the game. It's going to be like mobile phones were 10 or 15 years ago. They were, a luxury item for early adopters, but then all of a sudden you had these $10 handsets and everyone was on them, and that's where solar is heading at the moment. And I'll just briefly touch on Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. I don't want to get too into the weeds here, but Article 6 was part of the Paris Agreement where we were meant to have a global carbon price by now. For various reasons, the countries of our planet haven't been able to agree on that. So an alternative proposal is carbon border tariffs, where countries will put taxes on fossil fuels and high energy and high emissions products and services going across borders. And I think this is a real potential this could really happen. And I think anyone who's going to look into exporting things like cement or steel or fisheries really needs to consider what is the source of energy, what are the emissions embedded in those products and services. And finally, I'll just talk about SEEP itself. The problems that we face are the same things that a lot of Papua New Guinea companies have. We have issues with the Forex, which we recently written a paper, and I can put that up in the chat. And we have trying to develop skilled people to work in the industry. So at the moment, we're running a training program for youth and women and girls. We're trying to bring the industry up with us as starting from scratch. And it's going good. We've got great input from all of our stakeholders, and the future, to use a cliche, is looking bright. So that's all, I think. And I will thank you, and back to you, Andrew.